Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. Now we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, but I think it's definitely fair to say that this brewery are best known for their different kinds of Imperial Stouts. Now the beer we're having a look at today is a style that I've had from them many times before. It's a style that I know these guys can do very well. I've heard very good things about this particular beer, and it's also one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden as well. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head a little bit south of me here in Lund to Arlöv, and that means that we're going to go to the Molecule Brewing Collective once again, and this time we're having a look at another beer from Brewing. So this particular beer is called Sequence. It comes in at 10% ABV, it's an Imperial Stout, and to be specific, they're describing this one as a Rocky Road Imperial Milk Stout with toasted walnuts, pecans, marshmallows, caramel and vanilla. So yeah, should be pretty good. We've had many beers from Brewing before, a lot of different Imperial Stouts, a few Milk Stouts, and quite a few that have had nuts added into them as an adjunct. But this beer was released as part of the Lokalt och Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for May of 2023. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what we get. Always nice to review the latest release from Brewing. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brewing before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So yeah, like I say, just go in there. Use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like in. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries, and you'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other things, and you can check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you once again about Brewing. So, Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Malmö, and the company was founded by Hannes Gruber and Karin Karlsson back in 2015 when they had their premiere at the Malmö Öl and Whiskey Festival. So both of these guys were basically just big beer enthusiasts that wanted to get into the industry. But Hannes had been a home brewer for a long time and got very good feedback on his beers, and so this inspired him to turn professional and start his own company. But he comes from a background in software development and takes care of the brewing side of things, whereas Karen was an entrepreneur and a trader within the IT industry, and she managed the business side of the brewery, although she's no longer part of the company anymore. But as a result of Hannes's background in software development, many of the beers have, computer science related names, such as this one here, Sequence. But they started up with a very modest production, and they've become one of the most highly decorated Swedish breweries on Untappd, actually. So yeah, you will no doubt have heard of these if you are at all interested in Swedish craft beer. But initially they were brewing their beers at the Lilla Ölfabriken Chad beer facility in Rosengård in Malmö, and some also in South Plains Brewery, which is just next door. But the company officially joined with Chad Beer and Lilla Ölfabriken to form a collective, and they continue to sell their beers under their own brands. And Brewing, of course, focuses mainly on Imperial Stouts, but over the years they've released a few IPAs, barley wines and other things as well. I've reviewed one of the barley wines on the channel before, and we also had the IPA, which if I remember correctly was called Switch, and that was lovely actually. I do hope they rebrew that at some point in the future. But in the early days, other than a few festivals around Sweden, it was actually very difficult to get a hold of the Brewing beers. But since 2018, they've been selling their beers through Systembolaget and releasing things, usually at least once a month. But since in March of 2021, fasting forward from that, they announced a new collective called Molecule, and this includes Elm 11, Nerd Brewing and Chad Beer, and they've got their new brewery in Arlöv, which is a bit to the northeast of Malmö, and they start off there with a 1,500 litre brew kit. But yeah, it is actually Anders from Elm 11 who does most of the brewing for the Molecule Brewing Collective, so he's brewing his own beers under the Elm 11 brand, which are the kind of big, fruity, juicy, modern, Nordic, whatever we're going to call them, sour beers. The lagers and IPAs are released under the Chad Beer brand, and then of course Nerd Brewing is basically the Imperial Stout barley wine, big malty beast brand, if you like. But yeah, Anders, very good brewer, but Hannes does take part in the brewing, sometimes with the Nerd Brewing stuff, and does the recipe development and things like this as well. But in late 2022, they had their first pub day at the brewery, and they're hoping they can do this more regularly going forward. But as of May 2023, when I'm reviewing this particular beer for you, these guys have produced around 120 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd, and like I've mentioned numerous times during this review, they are best known for their Imperial Stouts. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Nerd Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's that for the moment. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself. Now, one thing I should say about this, it seems that there's been one or two versions of this beer before, because it is listed as 10.5% ABV on Untappd, but you can see quite clearly down here it states 10%. But you can see the artwork on this one is very similar to what we've seen from Nerd Brewing before. This time we have a nice dark blue wax top to this one, and you can also see on the bottom here Nerd Brewing's symbol. But yeah, like we said earlier, 10% Imperial Stout, Rocky Road Imperial Milk Stout with toasted walnuts, pecans, marshmallows, caramel and vanilla. And yeah, it should be quite interesting. One of the things I always love about the Nerd Brewing Stouts is that quite often, or for the most part, they are Russian Imperial Stout. They are like the more roasty, toasty, bitter RIS in the base, but they've always got some really nice kind of adjuncts on top of them. So, you know, these beers always let you know, yeah, this is an old school kind of RIS. But like I say, I like how this one goes together. It seems to be, I like how this one sounds, I should say. We've not tasted it yet. But if memory serves me correctly, I paid about 80 Swedish krona for this one, so that is about €8, £7 sterling, somewhere in the region of $9 American. But let's get this guy out into the glass and we'll see what it's all about. It's behaved well today. We've got the top of it, but that, in fairness, that was because I ran a knife around the edge of it before we started the video. But yeah, let's do this and get the beer out into the glass and see what it's all about. So, there we are. So this one, as you can see, it's poured pretty much as you would expect from a nice big Imperial Stout. Let me just place this so that my OCD is happy. There we go. And yeah, it looks exactly as we've seen the Imperial Stouts from Nerd Brewing before. So we'll get rid of the computer there. But yeah, anyway, now you can see the beer poured with about a 1/4 to 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of medium beige head there. You can see it has faded away to be a nice kind of thin foamy layer on top, but you've got that thicker ring around the edge of the glass, and you can see the kind of medium sized bubbles coming out of this one too. So yeah, looks very, very nice. In terms of the colour of this beer, it's pretty much as you would expect. Lovely kind of big dark ebony rosewood colour. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put in will affect the colour of this one as well. But yeah, when it comes to black beers such as Imperial Stouts, you can't really affect them by changing the barrel, or you can't really affect them with barrel aging. You know, black beers are very difficult to change the colour of just with barrel aging. I've only ever seen it done once, and it was a Puasta beer that had beets in it, if I remember correctly, but they managed to do it. And I can't remember if that was an Imperial Stout or a Porter, but anyway, you get the idea. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation with this one. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there, But overall, it does look pretty nice actually. So let's have a wee look at the aroma of this beer then and see how we get on. There's nothing really untoward about this beer in terms of its appearance when we consider what style it is. So let's do this. I'm very curious about this beer. Oh yeah. This does smell pretty damn good, I have to say. Yeah. I have to say, this is one of the kind of... I'm just trying to think back to the other Nerd Brewing beers that we've had before. To me, the aroma of this one is a little bit sharper and kind of more striking in some ways than some of the other ones we've had from Nerd Brewing in the past. But like I say, we've had so many Imperial Stouts from these guys, it's a little bit difficult to keep track. But yeah, with this one, you can smell the lovely kind of roasty, toasty base in there. You've got a bit of smoothness, you can smell the thickness of the malt base, and you've also got that lovely kind of fruity sharpness coming out of the beer as well. So yeah, the way this one goes together, I think, is very, very nice actually. Aroma-wise, it gets a big thumbs up from me. Let's break it down though and describe it a wee bit more in depth for you. So the backbone of the beer, you can smell you've got that lovely kind of roasty, toasty. You've got that lovely kind of roasty, toasty backbone to this one. Big Russian Imperial Stout. So yeah, you can feel that lovely roasty, toasty backbone in there. And yeah, you can see that, like, on top of that, there's a lot of cakiness coming out of this one. So you've got the roasty, toasty, well-fired backbone in there. You've got some nice woodiness in this beer as well, I would hasten to add. And a little bit of, you have got a little bit of a kind of vanilla type quality in there as well. So a little bit of woodiness and a little bit of vanilla. The roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust. And then you also have the, how do you say? You've also got the kind of cakiness on top of that. So the kind of, you've got like it's almost like a slightly toasty, dry, cakey edge that you get on top of that in this one, which is quite interesting. So you've got that dry kind of cakey edge coming out of the beer, which I really do like. Then on top of that, you have the, as I say, you have a little bit more of the, what do you say? So you get the kind of dry, cakey edge coming out of this one, and it's kind of like, it's not quite as like caramelised and things as, you know, that bit of, you know, cake batter that gets stuck to the baking tray or whatever, but there is that dry, cakey edge in there. On top of that, you've got a mix of like a chocolatey and kind of brown sugary sponge cake coming out, which is nice. And then above everything else, you start to get, there's a little touch of rye bread in there, like a sweet caramelised rye bread. You've got a kind of wholemeal brown bready character coming out of this one as well. Yeah, wholemeal kind of brown bready note coming out of this one. Rye bready kind of character in there as well. And you can smell all the different nuts coming out of the beer as well. The nutty character in this beer is actually quite sweet. I have had one or two beers that have had these big kind of nutty characters out of them before, but you know, this one, in that sense, this one is pretty unique, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think the other one, it was, what was it called? It was from Norway with Love. It was Lervig and Amundsen. It was a kind of one of the Rack series ones, and it was, yeah, Peanut Imperial Stout. We had a taste of that one at a staff meeting actually. So yeah, this one kind of reminds me of that in a little bit, but the sweeter, you can smell a lot of sweetness and a bit of saltiness out of the different kinds of nuts in this one, and they sit right at the front of the nose. So yeah, the way that this goes together is really good. So yeah, you get that nice kind of sponge cakey quality in there. There's a little bit of a kind of cocoa, there's quite a bit of chocolate in this one. You've got the darker chocolate in there, you've got the milkier chocolate as well, then you've got the big brown sugary characters coming out of this one. So yeah, it's quite interesting. So for me, you've got that highly caramelised, treacle molasses sort of thing in there. You've got a lot of leathery brown sugar coming out of this one as well. One of the things to note about Nerd Brewing is that they often, you know, they very often use very long wort boils, so you can smell that caramelises the sugar a lot. So you can smell that lovely kind of dry leathery brown sugar coming out of this one. Above that, you've got a little bit of toasty brown caramel in there, treacle molasses, sweet caramel as well. And as I say, the way everything goes together in this is really nice. Yeah, I like that. Coming with this one, you do get quite a lot of sweetness out of this. And then obviously, yeah, you get the nuttiness and stuff into the aftertaste. Yeah, I like this one. So, yeah, the way everything goes together in this beer is very, very nice. On top of the malty side of things, you've got a nice little bit of hoppy character remaining in this one, but I think we've said everything we really need to about the malty and yeasty side of this beer so far. The thing that's interesting is it's got marshmallow and things in it, and I'm not getting too much of that, but I think compared to everything else that's in this Imperial Stout, picking up the marshmallow might be a little bit difficult. But yeah, interesting stuff. On the hoppy side of things with this beer then, there's definitely, obviously the longer you keep this beer, the more the hoppy character is going to kind of drop out of it. And you can, with an Imperial Stout of this, you can certainly age it for a good little while. There's no problem with that. But yeah, this one, it does have a little bit of its hoppy character lingering about in it at the moment. So you can certainly smell a wee bit of earthiness coming out of this one. You've also got a good little bit, so you've got that little bit of earthiness in there, you've got a little bit of herbal character, and you've also got a nice little bit of floral aromaticity coming out of this beer as well, which I do like, and then some grassiness at the front of the nose too. So yeah, the green component of this one is pretty nice in that sense. I don't think we need to say too much more about that actually. I could sit and smell this all day. It's a lovely smelling beer actually. So on the fruity side of things, just to round off the kind of fruity aspects of the beer, you've got a nice little bit. You get quite a little bit of a sharp raisiny character out of this one. And then underneath that you've got some juicy plums, you've got a little bit of, you've certainly got a little bit of, you've got the raisins in there, the juicy plums, and the, and I would say the, quite a little bit, there's a little bit of drier fruit in there as well. You do get a little bit of kind of juicy fig out of this one, and there's a wee bit of, sultana and date and stuff like this. But then you've also got the big oily kind of figgy notes to this one. You have the you've got the big oily kind of figgy characters in this one. You've got the big oily figgy characters. This one you've got a little bit of blackcurrant in there and a little bit of blackberry. So yeah, the way that everything goes together in this one is quite is really quite interesting. So yeah, the way this beer goes together from that perspective is very, very nice. Yeah, I like this one. I do like how the aroma goes together in this beer. Lovely, lovely stuff. And it's this one is definitely a little bit sharper in its red fruity notes and a little bit more kind of obviously a little bit more nutty than some of the other Nairn Brewing ones that we've had in the past. But as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in. But I think it is about time that we try this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, let's do this then. So this one is the Sequence 10% ABV Imperial Stout, as always from Nairn Brewing, but they're describing this one as a Rocky Road Imperial Milk Stout with toasted walnuts, pecans, marshmallows, caramel and vanilla. This should be pretty damn nice. Let's do this one then. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, I'm going to say straight away, this is definitely one of the sweeter stouts that I've had from Nairn Brewing. It does, as the Nairn Brewing beers always do though, it gives you that little bit of roastiness and things into the aftertaste, which I really quite like. So, yeah, it's interesting this. It's very sharp on the beginning, it's very rich in the middle, it's got a little bit of dryness to it, then you've got a nice little bit of hoppy character coming out of it as well. So, yeah, the way that beer goes together, I think, is really, really nice. This one gets a big, big thumbs up from me. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, where do we go with this one then? We'll start with the middle third of the palate, as we always do with these beers. So, backbone of the beer, you've got that lovely kind of smooth, but still roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust backbone to this one. So yeah, roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust backbone there. As you move further forward in this one, you get a nice little bit of drier kind of woody character in there. You've got a good little bit of you've got a nice little bit of kind of woody character in there. There's a little touch of the vanilla, I think, coming out in there as well toward the front of that middle third of your palate, but that's all sitting within that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust backbone there. On top of that, you have a little bit of a kind of rye bready character, and it's quite a highly caramelised rye bready character that you get out of this beer. So yeah, the way that pieces together in this one is really, really nice. Yeah, so like I say, yeah, roasty toasty. Yeah, roasty toasty, well fired. Kind of bread crust there, a little bit of a highly caramelised rye bread on top of that. Then you start to get the cakey notes coming out of the beer. So yeah. So, yeah, the roasty toasty notes on this one linger into the aftertaste a little bit, but then you get the sweeter notes just sitting on top of that. So above that, you've got a nice kind of sweet, highly caramelised rye bready character out of this one. You've got the kind of sponge cakey quality in there, and you do have a little bit of that drier kind of cakey edge to the beer, but then above that, yeah, you've got a brighter kind of sponge cakey character in there, and it tastes a little bit like a kind of brown sugary kind of sponge, but a bit of chocolate brown sugary type sponge cake in there. And then above that, I think you get a layer of a kind of wholemeal brown bready note. But within the kind of cakey layers that I'm talking about, that's where you get the pecans and the almonds and things coming out of this one. So yeah. So, the pecans and the almonds that come out of this one are really quite nice in that sense. I do like how that goes together. You get a little bit of saltiness out of the nuts that are in this beer as well, and you get more of the dryness out of them the further into the aftertaste you go too. So above the above the kind of cakey and the brown bready layer, you start to get the chocolate and things like that. So yeah, the chocolatey character you have in this beer, you could probably say there's a bit of the marshmallow flavour coming out in the chocolatey side of things too. But yeah, at the back of that middle third of the palate, you can feel there's like a sort of 60-70%, probably 70-80% cocoa chocolatey character there. Then as you move further forward along that middle third of your palate, it gets a little bit more, it kind of smoothens out and sweetens up a little bit. So yeah, you can feel that you start to get more and more of a kind of milky chocolate coming out of this one, which is good. So yeah, you can feel that toward the front of that middle third of your palate, it gives you a little bit more of a kind of 30-40% cocoa chocolate. but above the chocolate, that's when you start to get the brown sugars out of this one. So you can feel a layer. You can feel a layer of like a kind of, I would say a more kind of leathery, sort of leathery brown sugary character coming out of this one. Yeah, so you've got that lovely kind of leathery brown sugary character coming out of it. As we say, then above that, the leathery notes are actually interesting. They linger into the aftertaste too. But then above that, you've got a slight layer of an almost slightly crispy, toasty, kind of brown sugary character coming out of the beer. Then above that, you have the more kind of treacle, molasses type notes coming out of the beer as well. So there's maybe a layer of it above the toasty caramel. You've maybe got a layer of a slightly sweeter caramel there, but in the dead centre of that middle third of your palate, that's where you get the highly caramelised treacle molasses sort of thing coming out of this beer. I really do like how that pieces together. Yeah, interesting stuff. So, I think that covers everything we really need to say about the middle third of your palate in this beer. Let's have a little look at the back third of your palate then. The border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of kind of bready, cakey build up in there. So yeah, there's a little bit of a kind of bready, cakey build up in there, which I do really quite like. So it is more like a kind of mix of that chocolate brown, sugary kind of sponge cake actually that's in that border region. But as I've always said, more dark and bitter flavours come out further back on the palate, and that's exactly what you're seeing with this beer as well. So you can feel a lot of the layers are similar, but they just come out in different consistencies. So you've got that roasty, toasty, well-fired backbone there, which is drier and more bitter on the back third of the palate. Then above that, you have the kind of highly caramelised rye bready sort of thing as well. And then you can feel that layer is a little bit taller and more airy, but not too much. Then you have the kind of sponge cakey layer, which is quite tall and quite airy in this case. And then you've got the wholemeal brown bready character, which sits above that, which is very kind of light and airy and bready and sort of things in there as well. And you can feel a little bit of the dryness, this kind of cocoa nibby dryness, just creeping over the top of that brown bread into the back third of the palate. But above that, you have the kind of yeasty. You've got the sort of yeasty character coming out of the beer as well, which is quite nice. So you can feel that. Pardon me. You can certainly feel the yeasty part. You can feel the yeasty part of the beer coming out, and it's kind of like a more airy, farmhousey type bread in there. You've got the nice kind of honeycomb and things like that as well, which is good. So you've got that nice kind of airy honeycomb type flavour, and you can definitely feel that the flavour is taller than on that back third of the palate. Then as you come further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, the way that goes together is pretty nice. So, I think that covers everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. Let's look at the hoppy side of things then. So, as we said earlier, the Imperial Stout is not the most hoppy, hop-forward style of beer, I guess we can say. But let's look at this anyway. So, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you get a little touch of herbal character. And I would say the herbal and earthy character you get out of this one is quite dry. But as you push further forward toward the front corners of your palate, you gradually get more and more floral note out of this one. And it's actually quite a wet, oily floral character you get out of this. But then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, I would say. So yeah, definitely interesting to see that. I wish I'd actually had a little look at the recipe of this one before I filmed the review, actually, because that's one of the things I never said that earlier in the review. The open source brewing thing, you can go on Nairn Brewing's website and get pretty much any of their recipes to look at. And so yeah, I know things, for example, that Hannes loves to use special bee malt and stuff like this, but I would really be very curious to know what hops he's used in this one, because in quite a number of his beers he gets this big fruity character and the wet green component as well. But yeah, like I say, a wet, oily, floral character there at the front corners of the palate, then round the front curve of the tongue, you've got a more oily, light, kind of a more oily, grassy type character coming out of the beer as well. So, yeah, the way this beer goes together is very, very nice in that sense. And yeah, I do like, as I say, it's the hoppy character gives you a good contrast to the kind of the latent dryness that this beer has, the further into the aftertaste you go. But let's look at that front third of your palate and see how all the fruity side of things piece together. So first off, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready, cakey sort of thing coming out of this one. So yeah, it's a kind of brown bready, cakey, yeah, sort of brown sugary, chocolatey, cakey type note, as I say, a little bit muffin-like actually. In the base of that front third of your palate, you've got the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, a bit of the wood in there, and then you've also got that nice, you do also have that very nice kind of cakey element coming out of the beer too. Above that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. The fruity side of the beer is actually a little bit different to how I was describing it before. But above that, you've got a nice little bit of you've got a kind of sharp, raisiny note out of this one. Yeah, you've got that big sharp kind of raisiny note out of it. You've got the big oily plums in there. Yeah, the big sharp raisiny notes out of this one. You've got the oily plums, and then as you move further forward in this beer toward the centre of that front third of your palate, you get the juicy, the big oily figgy characters in there. Then the front half of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit more kind of black currant in there, and then the oily black berries sitting on top of it. So yeah, the way that goes together in this one is really quite nice. It's quite a sharper and juicier, fruity character that you get out of this beer, absolutely. But let's round off. I think that's everything we need to say about the flavour of this one, to be honest with you. Let's round off with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So it's definitely full-bodied. The Nair Brewing beers are always full-bodied. So yeah, so say full-bodied beer, this one. Very kind of smooth and oily Imperial Stout in a way, but you've got that kind of dryness and sort of stickiness and stuff with this one. It almost feels like it's double mash actually. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. But yeah, you've got this big sticky oiliness that comes out of this beer. Very long wort boil, as I know Hannes likes to do. So you can feel that absolutely with this one. And then yeah, it just goes together really, really nicely. It has got a little bit of that roasty toastiness, as I say. It's basically an RIS with a bunch of sweeter adjuncts added on top of it. I think it's safe to say that. In terms of the IBUs with this beer, this has got to be, 60 or 70 IBUs potentially, somewhere around that kind of note. But it doesn't feel so bitter in a sense. I mean, yeah, maybe 50 actually. It could be around 50 or 60, maybe 70 is a bit too high, something like that. But it does have a little bit of dryness to it, and that's one of the things with the Nair Brewing beers, is that the dryness that you get out of these, it's often a very kind of sweet dryness actually. You can kind of easily conflate that with some of the bitterness and things like that. So yeah, like I say, this beer in the malt base, it's got a bit of roasty toastiness and smoothness. Under there you've got a lot of sweetness in the middle. Then yeah, you've got the more oily characteristics kind of coming out on top of that as well. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is very, very nice. The fruity characters, we said, it's a little bit sharper and a little bit sweeter. It's a lot of kind of bright red fruits that are coming out of this beer. And then yeah, you've got a little bit of hoppy character coming out of this one, quite an oily green component as well. But yeah, really another very, very good beer from their brewing. That's the thing with these guys. You always know that you're going to get a solid Imperial Stout from these guys. But I have to say, this is one of the ones I've enjoyed a wee bit more in comparison with some of the other ones in recent times. Actually, it's very difficult with their brewing to pick out a favourite that I've had, because it's the same style, and you know the flavour profile is a little bit more narrow. It doesn't kind of stand out so much. A lot of the different Nair brewing beers don't stand out from each other so much in that sense. But yeah, I've enjoyed this one. I have to say, I always enjoy the Nair brewing beers, but this one is a little bit more striking than some of the other ones I've had from them in recent times, and definitely one of the sweeter ones, I would say, that we've had as well. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one then. This was the Sequence, a 10% Imperial Milk Stout, Rocky Road Imperial Milk Stout they're calling it, with toasted walnuts, pecans, marshmallows, caramel and vanilla. So yeah, I think that is everything we need to say about this one. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from their brewing as well. And we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the near future. But in the meantime, check out my social media, check out theirs, and have a go at this one, the Sequence. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.